They mocked me at my son's engagement. Then I revealed I own the company they work for. You know that moment when someone looks right through you? When they see your worn hands, your modest clothes, your quiet demeanor, and they just decide you're nobody worth knowing. I've experienced that look more times than I can count. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the day I saw that same look on my own son's fiancée's face. When she looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her designer shoe. My name is Margaret Chen. I'm 62 years old, and for the past 35 years, I've worked in pharmaceuticals. Not as a scientist, not as a sales rep. I started as a night janitor in a research facility. But we'll get to that part of the story later. Because this story isn't really about my career. It's about my son David, the love of my life since the moment he was born. It's about the woman he chose to marry. And it's about the moment everything came crashing down in the most spectacular way possible. Let me take you back to where this all started. It was a Tuesday evening in March when David called me. I was in my small apartment in Queens, the same rent-controlled place I'd lived in since he was 5 years old. The paint was peeling in the corners, the radiator clanked like a ghost was trapped inside, but it was mine. I'd raised my son here after his father walked out on us. I'd made every meal in that tiny kitchen, helped him with homework at that second-hand dining table, watched him grow from a scared little boy into a man I was so proud of. Mom! His voice had that excited tremor that still reminded me of when he was 8 and brought home his first A+ paper. David! How are you, sweetheart? I set down the instant noodles I'd been preparing. My dinner could wait. Mom, I have news. Big news. He paused, and I could hear traffic in the background. He was probably walking back from his office in Manhattan, where he worked as a junior architect at Morrison & Associates. I'm getting married. My heart did this little flip, joy mixed with something else. Something I couldn't quite name yet. Oh, David. That's wonderful. Who's the lucky girl? Her name is Victoria Ashford. Mom, she's amazing. She's brilliant, beautiful, comes from this incredible family. Her father is Harrison Ashford. You know, the Ashford real estate dynasty? Her mother is Lorraine Ashford. She sits on like a dozen charity boards. And Victoria herself, she's a marketing director at Ashford Properties. The way he said their names, with such reverence, such awe, it made something twist in my stomach. I'd never heard him talk about his own background with that kind of pride. Never heard him mention how his mother had worked 3 jobs to put him through school. How I'd studied English in community college night classes so I could help him with his essays. How I'd gone without so he could have everything he needed. That's wonderful, honey. When do I get to meet her? Another pause. Longer this time. Well, that's the thing. Her parents are throwing an engagement party. This Saturday. At their estate in Greenwich. It's going to be pretty fancy, Mom. Like, really fancy. Okay. I waited for the invitation. And I was thinking, maybe you could dress up? I know you usually keep things simple, but Victoria's family is pretty traditional. First impressions matter a lot to them. Something cold settled in my chest. David, are you asking me to pretend to be someone I'm not? No. No, Mom, of course not. I want them to see you the way I see you. As someone amazing. Someone who deserves respect. But what he was really saying, what I heard beneath his words, was, I need you to look like you belong with people who have money. And that hurt more than I wanted to admit. I'll be there, I told him. And I'll look presentable. I promise. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. At 62, I saw a woman with gray-streaked black hair pulled back in a simple bun. Hands that were rough and red from years of harsh cleaning chemicals, even though I didn't clean anymore. A face lined with worry and exhaustion. I looked like exactly what I was, a working-class woman who'd spent her life fighting for every scrap of dignity. What David didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd stopped cleaning floors 15 years ago. That Saturday, I took the Metro-North train to Greenwich. The ticket cost $27.50 round trip. I noticed because I still noticed every expense, even though I didn't have to anymore. Old habits from those lean years died hard. I'd bought a dress from Macy's. Nothing extravagant. A navy blue A-line dress with long sleeves, modest neckline, hit just below the knee. It cost $89, which felt like a fortune even though I could have bought 1,000 of them without blinking. I paired it with my only good shoes, black pumps I'd bought for David's college graduation, and a simple pearl necklace I'd inherited from my mother. Looking in the mirror before I left, I'd thought I looked respectable. Appropriate. I had no idea how wrong I was. The Ashford estate wasn't a house. It was a sprawling compound that seemed to go on forever behind tall iron gates. A valet took my information at the entrance. I'd come in an Uber, which seemed to surprise him, and directed me up a winding driveway lined with perfectly manicured hedges and marble statuary. The main house was something out of a movie. White columns, grand entrance, windows that sparkled in the afternoon sun. There were easily 200 people scattered across the grounds, all dressed like they'd stepped out of a luxury fashion magazine. The men in tailored suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The women in designer dresses, dripping with jewelry that caught the light with every movement. I felt every eye on me as I approached the entrance. Felt them taking in my department store dress, my sensible shoes, the way I clutched my small purse like a lifeline. A woman intercepted me at the door. Tall, blonde, beautiful in that sharp-edged way that comes from expensive maintenance. She was wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost. They mocked me at my son's engagement. Then I revealed I own the company they work for. You know that moment when someone looks right through you? When they see your worn hands, your modest clothes, your quiet demeanor, and they just decide you're nobody worth knowing. I've experienced that look more times than I can count. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the day I saw that same look on my own son's fiancée's face. When she looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her designer shoe. My name is Margaret Chen. I'm 62 years old, and for the past 35 years, I've worked in pharmaceuticals. Not as a scientist, not as a sales rep. I started as a night janitor in a research facility. But we'll get to that part of the story later. Because this story isn't really about my career. It's about my son David, the love of my life since the moment he was born. It's about the woman he chose to marry. And it's about the moment everything came crashing down in the most spectacular way possible. Let me take you back to where this all started. It was a Tuesday evening in March when David called me. I was in my small apartment in Queens, the same rent-controlled place I'd lived in since he was 5 years old. The paint was peeling in the corners, the radiator clanked like a ghost was trapped inside, but it was mine. I'd raised my son here after his father walked out on us. I'd made every meal in that tiny kitchen, helped him with homework at that second-hand dining table, watched him grow from a scared little boy into a man I was so proud of. Mom! His voice had that excited tremor that still reminded me of when he was 8 and brought home his first A+ paper. David! How are you, sweetheart? I set down the instant noodles I'd been preparing. My dinner could wait. Mom, I have news. Big news. He paused, and I could hear traffic in the background. He was probably walking back from his office in Manhattan, where he worked as a junior architect at Morrison & Associates. I'm getting married. My heart did this little flip, joy mixed with something else. Something I couldn't quite name yet. Oh, David. That's wonderful. Who's the lucky girl? Her name is Victoria Ashford. Mom, she's amazing. She's brilliant, beautiful, comes from this incredible family. Her father is Harrison Ashford. You know, the Ashford real estate dynasty? Her mother is Lorraine Ashford. She sits on like a dozen charity boards. And Victoria herself, she's a marketing director at Ashford Properties. The way he said their names, with such reverence, such awe, it made something twist in my stomach. I'd never heard him talk about his own background with that kind of pride. Never heard him mention how his mother had worked 3 jobs to put him through school. How I'd studied English in community college night classes so I could help him with his essays. How I'd gone without so he could have everything he needed. That's wonderful, honey. When do I get to meet her? Another pause. Longer this time. Well, that's the thing. Her parents are throwing an engagement party. This Saturday. At their estate in Greenwich. It's going to be pretty fancy, Mom. Like, really fancy. Okay. I waited for the invitation. And I was thinking, maybe you could dress up? I know you usually keep things simple, but Victoria's family is pretty traditional. First impressions matter a lot to them. Something cold settled in my chest. David, are you asking me to pretend to be someone I'm not? No. No, Mom, of course not. I want them to see you the way I see you. As someone amazing. Someone who deserves respect. But what he was really saying, what I heard beneath his words, was, I need you to look like you belong with people who have money. And that hurt more than I wanted to admit. I'll be there, I told him. And I'll look presentable. I promise. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. At 62, I saw a woman with gray-streaked black hair pulled back in a simple bun. Hands that were rough and red from years of harsh cleaning chemicals, even though I didn't clean anymore. a face lined with worry and exhaustion. I looked like exactly what I was, a working-class woman who'd spent her life fighting for every scrap of dignity. What David didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd stopped cleaning floors 15 years ago. That Saturday, I took the Metro North train to Greenwich. The ticket cost $27.50 round trip. I noticed because I still noticed every expense, even though I didn't have to anymore. Old habits from those lean years died hard. I'd bought a dress from Macy's. Nothing extravagant. A navy blue A-line dress with long sleeves, modest neckline, hit just below the knee. It cost $89, which felt like a fortune even though I could have bought 1,000 of them without blinking. I paired it with my only good shoes, black pumps I'd bought for David's college graduation, and a simple pearl necklace I'd inherited from my mother. Looking in the mirror before I left, I'd thought I looked respectable. Appropriate. I had no idea how wrong I was. The Ashford estate wasn't a house. It was a sprawling compound that seemed to go on forever behind tall iron gates. A valet took my information at the entrance. I'd come in an Uber, which seemed to surprise him, and directed me up a winding driveway lined with perfectly manicured hedges and marble statuary. The main house was something out of a movie. White columns, grand entrance, windows that sparkled in the afternoon sun. There were easily 200 people scattered across the grounds, all dressed like they'd stepped out of a luxury fashion magazine. The men in tailored suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The women in designer dresses, dripping with jewelry that caught the light with every movement. I felt every eye on me as I approached the entrance. Felt them taking in my department store dress, my sensible shoes, the way I clutched my small purse like a lifeline. A woman intercepted me at the door. Tall, blonde, beautiful in that sharp-edged way that comes from expensive maintenance. She was wearing a cream-colored dress that probably caught warm smiles. Harrison and Lorraine beaming with pride. And David, she continued, turning to him. Thank you for choosing me, for seeing something in me worth building a life with. I promise to honor our relationship and the family we'll create together. A family built on the foundation of everything our parents have taught us about success, dignity, and maintaining standards. More applause. David stood, kissed her cheek, whispered something in her ear that made her laugh. I waited for her to acknowledge me. To say something, anything, about David's mother being there. About the woman who'd raised him, who'd given up everything for him. She didn't. The speech ended. The party continued. And I realized that to Victoria Ashford, I didn't exist. I wasn't worth mentioning because I wasn't worth remembering. I was an embarrassment to be hidden away at table 12, behind the roses, out of sight. After dinner, there was dancing. A full orchestra played while couples swirled across a temporary dance floor that had been set up on the main lawn. I watched David dance with Victoria, watched them look at each other like they were the only two people in the world. And I felt something break inside me that I didn't know could break anymore. I was thinking about calling my Uber, about leaving quietly without making a scene, when someone sat down in the chair beside me. You must be David's mother. I turned to find a man in his 70s, distinguished-looking with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore his expensive suit like it was comfortable, lived in. Not like costume the way my dress felt on me. Yes, I said carefully. I'm Margaret Chen. Robert Callahan, he said, extending his hand. I shook it, surprised by the warmth of his grip. I'm an old friend of Harrison's father. Known the family for years. It's nice to meet you. He studied me for a moment, his expression thoughtful. I couldn't help but notice you've been sitting here alone most of the evening. And I couldn't help but notice where they seated you. My cheeks burned. I don't mind. I'm just happy to be here for David. He didn't sound convinced. I also couldn't help but overhear earlier when Victoria was asking about your work. You said you used to work at a pharmaceutical facility? Yes, Metro Farm Research Center. I was a night janitor there for years. His eyebrows rose slightly. Metro Farm? On the Jersey side. That's right. Are you still with the company? In a manner of speaking, I said carefully. My role has changed significantly. Before he could ask more, Victoria appeared with Harrison at her side. She looked annoyed to see someone important talking to me. Mr. Callahan, she said, all sweetness. I hope Mrs. Chen isn't boring you with stories about her cleaning days. The air went cold. Harrison actually laughed, a short, barking sound that held no humor. Victoria's right, Harrison said, his eyes moving over me dismissively. I'm sure Mr. Callahan has better things to do than hear about mopping floors. He looked directly at me then. Though I suppose we should be grateful that people are willing to do that sort of work. Someone has to, after all. The condescension in his voice was breathtaking. He was literally standing there, at his daughter's engagement party, insulting his future son-in-law's mother to her face. "Dad," I heard David's voice, tight with anger. He'd approached without me noticing. "That's incredibly rude." "Oh, don't be so sensitive, David," Victoria said, touching his arm. "Daddy didn't mean anything by it. We're just making conversation." "No," David said, and I heard something in his voice I'd never heard before. Something hard and angry. "You're being deliberately cruel to my mother. Both of you." Victoria's perfect smile faltered. "David, calm down. You're making a scene. I don't care." He turned to me, and I saw something in his eyes that looked like regret. Like he was finally seeing what I'd been seeing all evening. "Mom, I'm sorry. This was a mistake. We should go." "Go." Victoria's voice rose slightly. "David, this is our engagement party. You can't just leave." "Watch me," he said, offering me his arm. But before we could move, Robert Callahan spoke up, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Actually," he said, looking between Victoria, Harrison, and me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Before anyone goes anywhere, I think there's something that should be clarified. Margaret, you said you still work at Metro Farm, just in a different capacity. What exactly is your current role there?" The entire table had gone quiet. Harrison was looking annoyed at the interruption. Victoria looked confused about why this mattered. David looked lost. And I looked at Robert Callahan and saw something in his eyes that made me think he already knew the answer to his question. That he was giving me a chance to say it myself. I took a deep breath. "I'm the CEO," I said quietly, "of Metro Farm Pharmaceutical Corporation. I've held that position for the past 15 years. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the orchestra playing in the distance, hear the clink of glasses and murmur of conversation from other parts of the party. But at our table, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Victoria's mouth had fallen open. Harrison's face had gone from ruddy to pale in about 3 seconds. David was staring at me like I just told him I was actually an alien from Mars. "What?" The word came from Victoria, barely more than a whisper. "Metro Farm Pharmaceutical Corporation. I know the CEO of Metro Farm. John Bradford. I've met him at conferences." "John Bradford retired in 2009, Robert Callahan said, and now I understood why he'd asked the question. He'd wanted to see their reactions. "I know because I sit on Metro Farm's board of directors. Margaret Chen was promoted from COO to CEO upon his retirement. It was quite the story. The woman who started as a janitor went to night school, worked her way up through quality control, operations management, and eventually executive leadership. Business schools use her as a case study." Victoria looked like she might be sick. But David said you were a cleaner. He said you worked night shifts." "I did," I said simply. "For 12 years. I cleaned those floors, scrubbed those toilets, emptied those trash cans. And I was good at it. But I was also paying attention. I noticed inefficiencies in lab procedures, waste in materials management. I started writing suggestions, leaving them for the day shift managers. Eventually, someone actually read them. Someone gave me a chance." I looked at David, whose face had gone through about 17 different expressions in the last minute. "I never told you because I never wanted you to feel like you owed your success to anything but your own hard work," I said softly. "Yes, I paid for MIT. But you earned your place there. You earned your degree. You earned your job. I wanted you to know that you did that yourself." "You're a CEO," David said, like he still couldn't quite believe it. "Mom, you're a... How did I not know this?" "Because I kept my personal life private. I still live in Queens. I still take the subway to work. I still remember what it's like to choose between groceries and electricity. Money doesn't change where you come from, David. It doesn't change who you are." Harrison had recovered enough to speak. "Even if this is true, and I'll be verifying it, why would you dress like..." He gestured at my Macy's dress. "Like this." "Because it's a nice dress," I said simply. "It's appropriate and I feel comfortable in it. I don't need to prove my worth with designer labels." Victoria had found her voice again, though it came out strangled. "David knew? David knew you were some kind of corporate executive and he let us think..." "He didn't know," I interrupted. "And I'm not some kind of corporate executive. I'm the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And I kept it private because I wanted to see what kind of people you really were. What kind of family my son was marrying into. The implications hung in the air like smoke. And what did you learn? Lorraine had appeared, her face tight with suppressed anger. She'd clearly been listening from nearby. I learned that you judge people based on their clothes, their job titles, their social status, I said evenly. I learned that you put me at table 12, as far from your important guests as possible, because you were ashamed to have David's working-class mother visible at your fancy party. I learned that you speak about service workers with contempt, never considering that those inferior people might be smarter, more accomplished, more valuable than you give them credit for. Now wait just a minute, Harrison started, his face going red. I'm not finished, I said, and something in my voice made him stop. I also learned something else. Something that became very clear this evening. I looked directly at Victoria. You work at Ashford Properties, correct? She nodded mutely, confused by the change in subject. As a marketing director? Yes, she said, her voice defensive. I've been there for 4 years. I earned that position. Did you? I pulled my phone from my purse, pulled up some information I'd researched earlier in the week. Because according to LinkedIn, you were hired directly into a director role at age 24, immediately after graduate school. No previous marketing experience. No years working up from junior positions. Just straight to the executive level. Her face went red. My father owns the company. Why shouldn't I start at a higher level? No reason at all, I said. Nepotism is common in family businesses. But let's talk about your company. Ashford Properties. Commercial real estate, primarily office buildings and business parks throughout the tri-state area. Is that correct? Yes, Harrison said coldly. And we're one of the most respected firms in the industry. I'm sure you are, I said. Tell me, Harrison, who are some of your major tenants? He looked confused by the question. We have hundreds of tenants. Law firms, financial services companies, tech startups. Let me be more specific, I interrupted. Do you have a pharmaceutical company as a tenant? Perhaps in your Edison office park. The color drained from his face. Metropharm, I said, watching his expression shift. We lease 3 buildings in your Edison location. 200,000 square feet of research and office space. Our lease is up for renewal in 6 months. The absolute silence that followed was deafening. You're bluffing, Victoria said, but her voice shook. You're making this up to embarrass us. I looked at Robert Callahan, who'd been watching this entire exchange with something that looked like satisfaction. Robert, would you mind confirming for them that I am who I say I am? Margaret Chen is indeed the CEO of Metropharm, he said formally. I've served on the board for 8 years. She's one of the most capable leaders I've ever worked with. Took a company that was struggling when she took over and turned it into an industry leader. Employee satisfaction scores are the highest in the sector. Innovation pipeline is robust. Stock price has tripled since she took the helm. And the Edison lease? I asked. I'm familiar with it, he said. It's one of your larger facility rentals. Significant investment in specialized lab equipment and infrastructure. Would be quite costly to relocate. Harrison's face had gone from pale to gray. Now, let's not be hasty. Hasty? I stood up, and even though I was 5'3" in my sensible pumps, I felt 10 feet tall. You spent this entire evening treating me like garbage, seating me in a corner like I was an embarrassment, making jokes about cleaning floors, laughing at my clothes, my background, my life's work. And now you're worried about being hasty. Margaret, Lorraine said, her voice taking on a pleading quality. I think there's been a misunderstanding. We didn't know. Exactly, I cut her off. You didn't know. You didn't bother to know. You saw a woman in a $90 dress and decided you knew everything about her. You saw janitor on her work history and decided she wasn't worth your respect. That's who you are. Not what you thought I was, who you actually are when you think nobody important is watching. David had been silent this whole time, but now he spoke up, his voice hollow. Mom, why didn't you tell me? I turned to him, and my anger softened. Because I brought you to this party knowing they were going to judge you. I told you to dress up, to make a good impression. I was ashamed of you. No, honey. Yes, he said, and his eyes were wet. I was ashamed that you didn't fit into Victoria's world. I was worried about what her family would think of my working-class mom who lived in Queens and took the subway. And all this time, you were. He couldn't finish the sentence. Victoria had recovered some of her composure. This is ridiculous. So you have a good job. That doesn't change the fact that you came from nothing, that you scrubbed toilets. That's not the kind of background we want in our family. Victoria! David's voice cracked like a whip. Stop talking. Just stop. David, be reasonable, she said, reaching for him. So I made a mistake about your mother's current position. That doesn't change anything between us. It changes everything, he said, stepping away from her. You spent all evening humiliating my mother, making her feel small. And you did it because you thought you could. Because you thought she was nobody. That's who you are, Victoria. When you thought she couldn't do anything about it, you showed me exactly who you are. Don't be dramatic, Harrison interjected. This is all just a big misunderstanding. Margaret, surely we can discuss this like adults. Your lease at Edison, we can renegotiate terms. Very favorable terms. I laughed. Actually laughed. You think I'm threatening you with the lease? Harrison, I don't make business decisions based on personal feelings. If Edison is the best location for our needs, we'll stay. If not, we'll move. That decision will be based entirely on operational requirements and financial analysis. Then what do you want? Lorraine asked desperately. An apology? We're sorry. We truly are. We didn't understand. You're not sorry for what you did, I said quietly. You're sorry you did it to the wrong person. You're sorry it might cost you money. But you're not sorry for being the kind of people who would treat anyone that way. I looked at Victoria. You're not sorry for seating an elderly woman in a corner like she was trash. You're just sorry that elderly woman turned out to have the power to affect your life. I picked up my purse. David, I'm going home. You should stay. This is your party, your engagement. Don't let my revelation ruin your evening. Mom, wait. He grabbed my arm. I don't want to stay. I can't stay here after everything. David, please, Victoria said, and now she was crying. Real tears, mascara starting to run. Please don't go. We can fix this. I'll apologize to your mother properly. We'll start over. How? He asked, and his voice was so tired. How do we start over from you hiding my mother in a corner? From your father laughing about mop floors? From you standing there and saying my family background isn't good enough for yours? I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did, he said. That's exactly what you meant. And the worst part is, I let you. I stood there and let you disrespect her because I was too worried about fitting into your world. I'm not sure I can forgive myself for that. I'm definitely not sure I can marry you. The silence that fell was broken only by Victoria's quiet sobs. David came home with me that night. Not to his apartment in the city, but to my place in Queens. He sat in my small kitchen, in the same chair he'd sat in as a boy, and we talked until dawn. I feel like I don't know you at all, he said at one point, holding the mug of tea I'd made him. CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Mom, how does someone do that? So I told him everything I'd never shared before. How I'd started as a night janitor making $8 an hour, pregnant and alone after his father left. How I'd noticed one night that the labs were throwing away expensive reagents that were only partially used. How I'd started tracking waste patterns, documenting everything in a notebook during my breaks. How I'd left that notebook on the desk of a quality control manager, unsigned, afraid of being told to mind my own business. How he'd tracked me down anyway, impressed by my observations. How he'd gotten me moved from janitorial to quality control, even though I'd had no education beyond high school. How I'd enrolled in community college, taking business classes while working full-time and raising a child. 4 years to get my associate's degree. 4 more for my bachelor's, this time at a state school. Then an MBA program that I completed over 6 years while working my way up from QC to operations to management. How John Bradford, the old CEO, had seen something in me, had mentored me, had promoted me to COO and then recommended me as his successor when he retired. You did all that while raising me, David said, wonder in his voice. While helping me with homework and coming to my school plays and teaching me to ride a bike. When did you sleep? Not much, I admitted. But I had something to work toward. Someone to do it for. You were my motivation, David. Every time I wanted to quit, every time I thought I couldn't handle it anymore, I looked at you and found the strength to keep going. And you never told me because Because I didn't want you to feel like you owed me something. Didn't want you to choose your life path based on guilt or obligation. I wanted you to be your own person, to achieve things because you wanted them, not because you were trying to live up to some impossible standard I'd set. He was quiet for a long time. Then, I was ashamed of you. I know. Not because of who you are, but because of who I thought you were. Because of what I thought they'd think. I know that too. How can you forgive me for that? I reached across the table and took his hand. Because you're my son. Because you're young and you made a mistake. Because we all get dazzled sometimes by wealth and status and the illusion of a world we think we want to be part of. But the question is, what do you do when you see the truth? When you realize that glittering world is built on contempt for people they see as beneath them? I leave, he said firmly. I walk away and I don't look back. I saw what it costs in human decency and basic kindness. I saw what it turns people into when they think they're better than everyone else. He squeezed my hand. I don't want to become that person, Mom. I don't want to be someone who looks at you, at anyone, and sees them as less than. I blinked back tears. I'm proud of you. I haven't done anything to be proud of. You recognized the truth when you saw it. You chose character over convenience. That's everything, David. We sat there in my small kitchen as the sun came up over Queens, drinking tea and not talking about Victoria or the Ashfords or engagement parties. We talked about his work, his dreams for the future, his hopes of starting his own architectural firm someday. We talked like we hadn't talked in years, without the weight of unspoken things between us. The phone calls started the next day. First Victoria, crying and apologizing. Then Lorraine, asking for a chance to make things right. Then Harrison, his voice stiff with forced humility, talking about unfortunate misunderstandings and getting off on the wrong foot. David ignored all of them. On Monday, my assistant informed me that Harrison Ashford had called the office requesting a meeting. I declined. On Tuesday, he showed up at our Manhattan headquarters, asking to see me. Security turned him away. On Wednesday, I got a call from Robert Callahan. You've stirred up quite a hornet's nest, he said, and I could hear the amusement in his voice. Harrison called 3 board members asking them to intervene with you. About what? The Edison lease, of course. He's convinced you're going to pull out in retaliation. He wanted us to pressure you to renew. And what did you tell him? That Metrofarm's CEO makes decisions based on business merits, not personal grievances. And that any board member who tried to pressure you into a decision that wasn't in the company's best interest would find themselves looking for a new position. I smiled. Thank you, Robert. No thanks necessary. Though I have to ask, are you planning to renew that lease? I'd actually been thinking about it. The Edison facility is well located and the infrastructure is good. But we've been considering expanding our research operations, and the current space is getting tight. I have our facilities team looking at alternatives, both expanding at Edison and relocating to a larger space. So it's a legitimate business decision. It's always a legitimate business decision, Robert. That's what people like Harrison don't understand. Just because someone has the power to hurt you doesn't mean they will. Sometimes we make choices based on logic and efficiency instead of emotion and revenge. You're a better person than most, he said. No, I corrected. I'm just a person who remembers what it's like to have no power at all. I'm not going to abuse it now that I have it. But that didn't mean there weren't consequences. The following week, I received a letter from Victoria. Not a text or email, an actual handwritten letter, delivered to my office. Dear Mrs. Chen, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I'm asking anyway. I was cruel to you. I was dismissive and condescending, and I treated you like you were beneath me. I did it because I thought I could. Because I thought you were nobody important and your feelings didn't matter. I was wrong. Not just because you turned out to be someone important, though I'll admit that came as quite a shock, but because I was wrong to treat anyone that way, regardless of their position or status. I was raised to believe that there are certain standards that separate our kind from others. That breeding and background matter more than character or achievement. I never questioned it because it served me well. It made me feel superior, special, better than. Watching David walk away from me was the first time I've ever faced real consequences for that attitude. The first time someone I cared about chose dignity over me. I'm not writing this to win him back. I know that ship has sailed. I'm writing because you deserved an apology that isn't contingent on business deals or social standing. You deserve to be treated with respect from the beginning, and I failed you. I hope someday David can forgive me. I hope someday I can forgive myself. Victoria, I read it 3 times. Set it down. Picked it up and read it again. The thing about apologies is that they don't erase what happened. They don't undo the hurt. But sometimes, if they're sincere, they show that someone is capable of growth, of seeing their own flaws and wanting to do better. I didn't respond to the letter. But I didn't throw it away either. 3 months later, I made my decision about the Edison lease. After extensive analysis, our facilities team recommended against renewal. Not because of the Ashfords, but because we'd identified a better property in Princeton. More space, better access to university partnerships, room for future expansion. Harrison called me personally when he received the notification. His voice was careful, controlled. Margaret, I understand you've decided not to renew the Edison lease. That's correct. Can I ask why? Is this about what happened at the engagement party? No, Harrison. It's about square footage, proximity to research partners, and long-term growth projections. Our team ran the numbers. Princeton came out ahead. A long pause. I see. However, I continued, I want to be clear about something. What happened at that party was unacceptable. The way your family treated me was cruel. But I'm not the kind of person who makes business decisions based on personal slights. I wouldn't be a very good CEO if I let my feelings about your daughter's behavior affect hundreds of employees and millions of dollars in operational decisions. I understand. And for what it's worth, I am sorry. We handled that evening poorly. You handled it exactly the way you've probably handled similar situations hundreds of times, I said. The only difference is that this time, you faced consequences. That's not about me punishing you, Harrison. That's about you learning that actions have repercussions, even when you think you're untouchable. After I hung up, I sat in my office, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, and thought about the journey that had brought me here. From mopping these very floors, I thought about Victoria's letter, still in my desk drawer. About whether people could really change or if they just learned to hide their true natures better. Mostly, I thought about what I'd learned. That respect can't be demanded or bought. It has to be earned. And it has to be given freely, without consideration of what someone can do for you or to you. 6 months after the engagement party, I was invited to speak at a women's leadership conference. The organizers wanted me to talk about my journey from janitor to CEO. The story that Robert Callahan had mentioned was used as a business school case study. I stood on that stage, looking out at an audience of hundreds of women from all walks of life, and I told them the truth. People ask me how I did it, I said. How I went from cleaning toilets to running a Fortune 500 company. They want to know the secret, the trick, the shortcut. And the truth is, there isn't one. I worked harder than I've ever worked at anything. I studied while my son slept. I took night classes while other people were watching TV. I said yes to opportunities that terrified me. I failed. God, I failed so many times. But I got back up. But here's what I want you to understand. My success didn't happen because I was special. It happened because someone gave me a chance. Because a quality control manager read my notes and saw potential instead of presumption. Because a CEO believed that a woman who cleaned his office could one day run his company. And it happened because I never forgot where I came from. I never forgot what it felt like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to have people look through you like you didn't exist. Some of you in this audience are executives. Some of you are entrepreneurs. Some of you are students or entry-level employees or people just starting out. And I'm telling you, how you treat the person who cleans your office matters. How you treat the person who serves your coffee matters. How you speak to the receptionist or the security guard or the intern matters. Not because they might secretly be a CEO in disguise, but because they're human beings who deserve your respect regardless of their position or their paycheck. The engagement party story has gotten a lot of attention. People love it because it's satisfying. The rich snobs get their comeuppance, the underdog wins. But that's not the point of the story. The point is that character is what you do when you think nobody important is watching. And everyone is important. Everyone deserves dignity. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, a young woman approached me. She was maybe 25, dressed in a server's uniform. She'd clearly been working the event. Mrs. Chen? I'm sorry to bother you, but I just wanted to say thank you. I'm working 3 jobs while I finish my degree, and sometimes I feel like nobody sees me. Like I'm invisible. Your speech reminded me that I won't always be invisible. That if I keep working, keep pushing, I can get where I want to go. I took her hands in mine. You're not invisible. I see you. And more importantly, you see yourself. That's what matters. Keep pushing. Keep fighting. And when you get where you're going, remember this feeling. Remember what it's like to be underestimated. And treat everyone you meet with the respect you wish you'd received. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and walked away. David had come to the conference to support me. As we left the venue, he put his arm around my shoulders. I'm proud of you, Mom, he said. I'm proud of you too, honey. I have a date next week, he said suddenly. Sarah. She's a teacher at that community center I've been designing. She asked me what my mom did, and I told her you were the CEO of a pharmaceutical company. And you know what she said. What? She said, that's cool, but what's she like as a person? That's what she wanted to know. Not about your job or your money. About who you are. I smiled. She sounds smart. She is. She teaches special needs kids in the Bronx, makes $35,000 a year and says it's the most important work she's ever done. I think I'd like to meet her. I think you will, he said. Next week, if you're free. Just dinner. Nothing fancy. Maybe that Chinese place you like in Queens. That sounds perfect. We walked to the subway together, the CEO and the architect, looking like any other mother and son in New York City. Nobody gave us a second glance. Nobody knew my story or cared about my title. And that was exactly how I liked it. Because the truth is, I'm not special because I'm a CEO. I'm not important because I run a Fortune 500 company. I'm just Margaret Chen from Queens, a woman who worked hard, got lucky, and never forgot where she came from. And in the end, that's all any of us really are. People doing our best with what we've got, hoping to leave the world a little better than we found it. That's not a story about revenge or comeuppance or proving your worth to people who don't deserve your time. It's a story about dignity, about treating people with respect, about remembering that everyone you meet is fighting battles you know nothing about. And it's a reminder that the person you dismiss today might be the person